Hi everyone, my name is Shelby Blackstock. Today I'm going to discuss sex education. The topic can be a bit awkward, but I feel like it needs to be addressed in some way. We live in a world where advertisements are oozing with sex appeal, and where movies and television programs contain inappropriate sexual behaviors demonstrated for everyone to see, in spite of physical or psychological age. In modern times, it is rare to find a single teenager that is not sexually active. From the West Coast to the East Coast across America, more adolescents are giving in to peer pressure in interest of sexual activities. As an outcome of this amplified sexual activity, there are more cases of sexually transmitted diseases in teen pregnancies. Adolescents are feeling a vast sum of pressure to engage in sexual activities at a young age due to today's teenage culture, movies, shows, and music. From age 10 to age 20, there is a need of essential awareness on the responsibilities sex brings. With recent studies and statistics, it is inevitable to see that sexual education is taken seriously. This belief is shared with older generations in the United States as well. 82% of adults concur that high school should add comprehensive sex education into the curriculum that in detail identifies sexual intercourse and explains in depth how unexpected pregnancy or an STD can affect a young adolescent, as well as ways to stop such occurrences. The United States government has made many attempts to add sex education into the school system, but after decades of attempts, not much has happened. There needs to be a comprehensive class for adolescents on sex education. Instead, the government is relying on abstinence-only programs to do the teaching. However, do these programs clearly explain the effects and responsibilities of sexual intercourse? The history of sex education in America seems to provide ridiculous stories and failed attempts. Education on sexual intercourse for adolescents in America has never proven to be successful, according to the article written by Johanna Kornblatt. The earliest form of sex education came from pamphlets. These pamphlets discussed the importance of nutrition, basic knowledge of theology, and an overwhelming sense of obsession on the immense evils brought on by self-simulation. Sylvester Graham attempted to contribute to this education. Graham, who is famous for mixing wheat flour to create the cracker that also shares his name, traveled across the East Coast warning adolescent males in self-pollution. In his mind, self-pollution was responsible for illness, insanity, and even death. Young boys must have been horrified by his particular and false claims. In 1892, the National Education Association first entertained the idea of sex education in schools. The subject would teach immoral education. In 1913, Chicago became the first city to offer education classes on sexual intercourse. However, the course did not last long. The Catholic Church disagreed that schools should offer education on sexual intercourse and launched a campaign forcing Ella Flagg Young, the superintendent of schools, to resign. During the 1920s, between 20% to 40% of high schools began integrating sex education into the school schedule. Sex education in schools began to branch out. College began to offer graduate programs for sex education teachers. In 1964, Mary Coldren, a physician and medical director at Planned Parenthood, founded the Sexuality, Information, and Education Council of the United States. However, during the 1960s and 1970s, the resistance for sex education started to grow. Religious groups made pamphlets asking if public school grounds were acceptable place for adolescents to learn about the sexual intercourse. Rumors of sex education teachers telling students to become homosexual, saying stripping was an acceptable lifestyle, and even forcing students to engage in sexual intercourse in front of his class rapidly spread. Parents were outraged by the sudden rumors of what exactly goes on during sex education classes. During the AIDS and HIV pandemic of the 1980s, supporters of sex education found more strength in their argument on why schools should include sex education. In the 1990s, every state passed mandates for AIDS education, but not necessarily sex education. Still, this offered hope to the supporters, but that hope was crushed when conservationists began to rename sex education as abstinence-only education. Religious conservatives helped add provision for abstinence-only education to the 1996 Welfare Reform Act. The government allowed money to be used for abstinence-only programs for the first time in history. However, not all states have these programs. There are some states that have no requirements on sex education at all. Abstinence-only programs teach adolescents there is more than one option than having sexual intercourse. That option is waiting until marriage. Families might find comfort in learning their children are gaining knowledge about how to say no to sex and how to remain abstinent. Though abstinence is ideal, it is also unrealistic. Sexual intercourse might be looked down upon by some people, but it remains a primitive instinct. With hormones stirring, it is more likely that adolescents will become involved with any form of sexual activity instead of remaining abstinent. Though abstinence is a great thing to teach, it does not always cover all the basic materials. Teaching adolescents that sexual intercourse is wrong is setting limitations on what they should be learning. There is more than one way to achieve sexual pleasure. Through media and peers, adolescents will learn this. What they need to learn along with this knowledge is any form of sexual activity has responsibilities. Though these classes might be serving limiting knowledge to adolescents, it is still better than no programs at all. Adolescents who receive no education on sexual intercourse or abstinence-only education are being hindered. The government's lack of requirements towards a comprehensive sex education program is not beneficial or supporting the families. The pregnancy and STD rates among adolescents are the highest that they have ever been. Unexpected pregnancies affect the entire family, and the high STD rates have everyone at risk. Some claim that sex education should be taught only at home by the parents. Even then, some adolescents are not learning the necessary knowledge to prepare them for the sexual situations or emergencies. With no policy made towards a requirement for sex education, families are left to handle this issue alone. With most families consisting of two parents working, the children are left to learn this by themselves with only the information they receive from media, peers, and the internet. The information that they learn can be misunderstood. Adolescents need to know the different forms of contraceptives, how to prevent STDs, and how to handle unexpected pregnancies. The lack of programs towards sex education is hindering the function of families. It is creating unnecessary friction in families' day-to-day lives. Without the knowledge, families are experiencing problems that could have been prevented by sex education. When a teenage girl gets pregnant, her parents must accept the fact that their daughter needs their support and help her through the sometimes difficult process. This could have been prevented if the teenage girl was taught about contraception. The government creates policies that should strengthen the family and parental involvement. This goes along with no requirements towards sex education because families are forced to become responsible and inform their children on sexual education. Families are responsible to get involved and discuss sexual activity and intercourse and the responsibilities that come with it. However, not all families do this. Families came together in 1996 to create the abstinence-only programs. Some of these programs are still going on, but are sending out the message that abstinence is the only way. There is still diversity in beliefs. Policies must include every family. It's important that families come together and work as a team, but the work that they strive for should benefit and be acceptable for every family. Religious beliefs that some families hold are different than those held by other families. Some parents might force abstinence upon their child, while others are more liberal. No matter what a family may believe or experience, education on sexual activity and intercourse is necessary. It is vital information that will be used at some point in someone's life. Education on sexual activity and intercourse can change our future generations. The government should require all high schools to have some form of sex education classes. In order to accommodate all families, certain measurements should be made. The class should be optional. Parents would be notified of the optional class. If the parents feel like it is appropriate, the child must enroll. If the parents do not feel like it is appropriate, then the child can take a substitute class. With sex education classes, the pregnancy and STD rates should be cut down drastically. Did you know the United States has the highest rate of teen pregnancy in the developed world? Teen pregnancy is the #1 reason for teenage girls to go into the hospital. In detail, almost 1 million adolescent females get pregnant in the United States every year. It is vital that both male and female youth know about ways to avert pregnancy. Sex education classes would inform teenagers about the significance of practicing safe sex and to teach them about the different methods of birth control. There are many different forms of birth control. In 2002, only 1/3 of adolescents had been informed about some of the different techniques of contraception. Contraception is an essential piece of knowledge that all young people who choose to engage in sexual activity need to know. Sex education lessons should teach adolescents about pregnancy, child labor, as well as the fundamental responsibilities of being a parent. Sex can cause pleasurable stimulation, but can also cause painful diseases known as STDs. Chlamydia cases in 2007 in America summed up to a whopping calculation of over 1.1 million. Since reporting in 1984, chlamydia cases have enlarged year after year, compelling chlamydia to be one of the main generally spread STDs. The following most frequently reported STD in the United States is gonorrhea, totaling 119 diagnoses per 100,000 of the population. This number is the lowest ever reported, but it has been rising. Adolescents need to understand all the different types of STDs and the symptoms when deciding to become sexually active. The STD epidemic is alarming to America's health. One research study offered in 2008 exposed 3.2 million American women ages 14 to 19 have contracted at least one of the 4 most frequent STDs. It is immensely important that adolescents know this essential information. Many adolescents learn false information on sex and STDs. One of these falsely informed myths is the belief that one can merely contract an STD from vaginal penetration. To avoid such contact but still gain pleasure, young people connect sexually by participating in oral sex. By the false information that is being spread, some young teenagers are oblivious to the truth. A person can contract some STDs through oral sex. I am confident that sex education can decrease the number of STDs. The constant peer pressure that adolescents feel to become sexually active is contributing greatly to the figures calculated on adolescent sex. Although teenage males do feel pressured, teenage females are experiencing more effects. Teenage girls feel guilty when saying no when the opportunity of sex arises. The girls are more concerned regarding how they are scrutinized whenever they do say no. In order to stop this issue, sex education will relieve some of that stress being experienced on the decision to have sex and give both girls and boys the ability and confidence to say no. Sex education has the ability to also limit some cases of sexual harassment or rape. All teenagers ought to be educated that sexual harassment and rape are equally wrong. If the situation involving either of the two issues comes about, the person who is causing the harassment and abuse should be reported to an authority figure. 60% of adolescent girls in 2008 reported sexual harassment or rape. However, 15 of the 16 rapists will on no account spend a day in jail due to those who do not report. It is a depressing truth that some parents are not as involved as they should be and do not openly converse this topic with their children. Rather than taking accountability, parents appear to rely on teachers and schools to initiate these issues with their children. Adolescents should learn to speak up when they become a victim of sexual harassment or sexual abuse, and sex education classes can offer this within the course material. Optimistically, this awareness in sexual abuse could lessen crime rates, while also helping make the world safer for potential generations. True, sex education classes might contain information that some parents may feel unsuitable for their children to learn. Some parents might also believe learning about a subject can occasionally ignite curiosity to learn new information and gain stimulating experience. This creates a risk of teenagers becoming sexually active. Nevertheless, with the sex education class, adolescents will gain an adequate understanding of all risks and responsibilities connected with sex at an early age. No matter how old a person is, sexual activity is a part of life. Young adolescents can gain life lessons and beneficial knowledge from this course. Although some adolescents will come to the decision to participate in sexual activities regardless of the consequences implicated, the young teenagers will have better knowledge on how to be aware and how to avoid penalties that come with sexual activity. Sex education needs to be mandatory in every school's curriculum. Mankind exists to reproduce. This is our main purpose in life. Whether a teenager goes through a class or not, sex will be a part of his or her life. Instead of doing research or publicizing the high pregnancy or STD rates, why not take control of the issue? I, for one, would rather take control of a problem instead of sitting on the sidelines complaining and making judgments. Our youth is experiencing more disturbance in their lives. Let's not be blamed for the lack of responsibility or apprehension.